Labyrinths is brought to you by Knox Robinson Productions. Please consider becoming a patron. For as little as $5 a month, you can listen to Labyrinths ad-free.
Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson to learn more.
I thought I was going to get pregnant right away. Now it's almost 2 years down the road and we're still trying new things.
So my partner, his biggest hang-up is like needing the help to get pregnant. But, doing the natural route is obviously not working.
No luck. Never even so much as a pregnancy scare.
I always sort of joked, you better marry me, my eggs are getting old, just not even realizing.
And the months were going by and nothing was happening.
And then at a year and a half, I was like, okay, I'm just going to tell my doctor what's going on. And that's when things started to get dark. Every month was cruel. You have 15 days of hope and then 10 days of despair on the other side. And it just goes around and around and around.
Feeling lost?
Then you're in the right place.
I'm Amanda Knox.
And I'm Christopher Robinson.
And this is Labyrinths. The labyrinth of infertility has many dead ends. Last time, we looked at miscarriages. In part 3 of our mini-series, we're exploring the medical complications that make conception difficult and the uncertain and often painful solutions offered by modern science.
For many couples, the problem of infertility slowly makes itself known after years of trying. For others,
I had an idea as early as when I was 20 years old that I had PCOS.
I had something called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's like a little hormonal imbalance. Women that have it just don't ovulate as frequently.
My doctor told me you're going to need medical intervention to become pregnant.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome was one of the most common problems we heard about from those who reached out to us. According to the U.S. Department of Health, it affects 1 in 10 women of childbearing age.
My ovaries are enlarged and I have a lot of cysts. So even if I do have a period, I may or may not be ovulating.
The other most common problem we heard about was endometriosis, which also affects 10% of women.
When I was 15, I was diagnosed with endometriosis,
which is when the lining of the uterus grows in other parts of your body. Most women that have endometriosis have severe menstrual cramps, almost debilitating periods.
I had an aunt who was unable to have kids. I have a sister who's older than me, and she was diagnosed with endometriosis. And my mom was also diagnosed with endometriosis. My husband and I, we went to a fertility clinic, and worst fear situation, I have endometriosis as well. Something that I had been dreading my whole life was coming to fruition.
There are a host of other issues that can make conception difficult, including disorders and side effects of treatments not directly related to fertility.
I knew from a very early age that I would probably need to have some sort of help. I had autoimmune issues, and when I was around 18, a doctor told me that you probably will have a high-risk pregnancy or need assistance.
I always kind of had this sneaking suspicion that it would be more difficult for me because I'm a pediatric cancer survivor. We keep having chemical pregnancies where essentially the sperm and egg meet, but they don't implant. You're just pregnant long enough to get excited and to think it's the right one and it's going to stick. And then usually 3 days or so after the positive, it goes back to negative.
It seems like there are 1,000 ways that fertility can be compromised. And some people are unfortunate enough to face many of these difficulties at once.
When I started having periods, they were always pretty brutal. Like I'd bleed for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Have horrible cramps. And so at 18, I want to say I was like a senior in high school. I told my mom about it finally. And she's like, this is not normal. So we went and saw an endocrinologist and I got diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then at 26, I got diagnosed very similar to endometriosis. And I'm still kind of processing this one, but I just got diagnosed with hyperprolactinemia.
Okay.
Each one by themselves is difficult to get pregnant, but then like to have all three, it's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult to get pregnant naturally. For so many years, I felt like so much shame about it, that there was like something inherently wrong with me.
There's a tendency to feel like you're defective in some way. I'm just so grateful for science. So grateful that we have this blessing of this modern medicine that can help people create families.
It's a mixed and uncertain blessing that modern medicine offers those struggling with infertility. For the non-invasive and economical options have low success rates for people suffering from things like PCOS and endometriosis. Nonetheless, many couples start with timed intercourse and medications to induce ovulation. If that fails,
the next step was something called IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. Basically, you take a medicine that matures your egg so that you're more likely to ovulate. It helps the timing if you have your regular cycles. And your partner leaves a sample, and they clean the sperm and get all the good ones ready. And then in the office, they actually insert it into your uterus. We did that 3 times. They have you lay on the exam table after just to let things set for a minute before you just stand up. And I remember they're like, you can be in there like 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, well, I'm going to wait 20. So I come out after 20 minutes. The nurses are like, oh my gosh, you're still here? Like, we thought you left. And what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I wanted to try a little longer.
I'm an overachiever.
Yeah. After 3, the doctor had talked to us about how IUI really isn't as effective after that. If it's going to work, it should usually work in the first 3 tries. A lot of women will do 6, 10 IUIs and just keep going because they don't have any financial means to go on to the next step, which is IVF.
In-vitro fertilization, meaning fertilization in the glass, is the process of extracting eggs from the ovaries, taking a semen sample from the male partner, and fertilizing the egg in the laboratory, hence the term test tube baby. After a successful fertilization, the embryo is then implanted back into the uterus to gestate. As of 2018, nearly 2% of all babies born in the U.S. were the result of IVF, which is the gold standard of infertility workarounds. But
IVF is very expensive. So you have to look at your financial picture and ask yourself, can I take on this giant, unexpected financial cost to have a child?
It's tens of thousands of dollars.
And I wish I could tell you that the staff had more emotional intelligence around how to help people through this, and for me, they didn't. My experience was that they didn't. And not that I needed to be coddled, but I felt like I was a number, that I was a stat to them, and it's a business, and they just push people through.
The hard truth is that the fertility industry is a business, predicted to be worth over $30 billion by the end of the decade. That's precisely because it is offering help for something as intimate and existential as procreation. Perhaps nowhere else is science so personal.
Going through this whole labyrinth, the emotional journey alone is so hard that I can't imagine people struggling to pay for this. These things are on strict timelines. You got to start your shots when they tell you have to start your shots.
Absolutely.
So if the insurance company hasn't approved it, they say, well, we can send them to you for $2,500. You can get reimbursed, which will never happen, by the way.
If we did IVF, they would be able to genetically test the embryos prior to implantation and see if they had no mutation. And so it would kind of spare me the heartache of having to find out the hard way each time, but it's just really expensive. And my insurance covers none of it.
I suppose it shouldn't be surprising that, in a country that considers eyes and teeth to be optional body parts not covered by primary insurance, that fertility, arguably the most essential function of any living thing, is also considered optional.
We could give you lots of reasons to support Labyrinths on Patreon, including ad-free episodes and exclusive patron-only content. But why not hear it direct from a listener?
My name is Henry, and I've been a supporter of the Labyrinths podcast for some time. I can totally relate to the concept of feeling lost, and I think the stories have helped me tremendously getting through these last couple of years, and I think they would help others as well.
Visit patreon.com/Knox Robinson.
The first step in vitro fertilization is typically ovarian hyperstimulation. If you're picturing jittery, cartoon-eyed ovaries throwing back shots of espresso, you're not alone. Normally, the ovaries release one egg each menstrual cycle. For those facing infertility issues, they may not be ovulating at all. But the ovaries can be stimulated to release multiple eggs at once. The catch? You better get used to needles.
I've been on, at some points, 3 different types of shots in one day.
I once calculated how many shots I gave myself. I think it was like over 800 shots that I gave myself in the whole process.
So you're mixing your own shots, administering your own shots, which was something I'd never done before. And there's a moment of panic every time. Am I doing this right?
I get blood draws multiple times a week. So my arms and even my hands are bruised because my veins got so tired that they started taking blood from my hands. And it feels like you're a little bit of a lab rat sometimes.
Your body can respond kind of wildly to the hormones that you have to take shots of and everything. I made a ton of eggs. My body went crazy. My stomach puffed up.
Oh dear.
I went to work. I was like, I think I need to go home. And my boss was like, oh my gosh, look at you. And I was like, I know.
I was sick to my stomach, throwing up at some points even.
And it was really painful. And I felt like I couldn't even breathe. It was almost like I became like 6 months pregnant overnight.
How much can my body take this? When you go through an IVF round, your stomach is bruised up, your arms are bruised from all the shots and the needles. You've been poked and prodded.
Going through this is so all-consuming. Every day I'm focused on what's happening with my body. What are my side effects? What medication do I have to remember to take right now? What shot do I have to take at 8 or 10? There are some times where I feel like I've gotten so lost in it that I forget that I'm also a lawyer. I'm a person with friends. I'm a person who loves music and likes to get lost in trash reality TV. I have interests and a whole life.
After the ovarian follicles are stimulated, the eggs need to be extracted through a process known as transvaginal oocyte retrieval. With the aid of an ultrasound, they pierce the vaginal wall with a large needle to reach the ovaries and hopefully retrieve between 10 and 30 eggs.
I administered my shot to release the eggs and went in the next day for the egg retrieval. They've got you hooked up to an IV and I'm waiting for my turn and I can hear the woman in the bay next to me because it's just curtains separating us. And they're telling her like, oh, your retrieval went great. We got 30 eggs. So I'm like, okay, cool. That information sort of washed over me.
We were actually told beforehand that they were only going to be able to access my left side. So my entire ovarian stimulation process depended on my left side responding. And so right before they knocked me out for the procedure, I was like, think left. And they got 11. When they told me they got 11, they said for one side, that is really remarkable.
I go in, they put me under, I come out, wake up slowly, you're all groggy and kind of feeling weird. They come in to tell me and they're like, we've got 5 eggs. I'm thinking that's terrible. The woman before me had 30. I have 5. From everything they've told me, sometimes they're not good eggs and they won't fertilize. And the doctor was like, well, it only takes 1. Well, sure, yes.
One good one.
One good one. And I want all the odds stacked in my favor. And so having 5 eggs isn't awesome. And then it turns out it wasn't great. Out of those 5 eggs, 3 fertilized.
The process of fertilizing the eggs seems rather simple. The egg and sperm are typically incubated together at a ratio of 1 to 75,000. After a number of hours, the egg will hopefully be fertilized. But there's no guarantee.
every single time I go through this, I just barely eke out. They retrieved 2 eggs and neither one fertilized. Another failed attempt. We tried again and we got all the way to egg retrieval. And then you got to hope that they get a couple good eggs to work with. Thankfully, they came out with 4. And then you're like, okay, they got to fertilize. And then 2 of them fertilized. And then by the time you get to the transfer, only 1 of them was left, like 1 embryo. And all the odds are against you. They'll be like, oh, you have a 13% chance of this working. And we're getting ready to try for our 4th and final time next month. Some women go through multiple cycles.
And every step of the way, there's a new opportunity to fail. Often, the process of transferring the embryo back into the uterus doesn't succeed.
They wanted to do 1 fresh embryo transfer and they were going to freeze the other 2. Well, 1 didn't make it to the 5-day growth period. So that one was gone. So I had 1 egg frozen and then 1 fresh transfer. I had the fresh transfer. You wait 2 weeks and then you go in for a blood draw. You have your lab work done and then you wait. And then I got the phone call that it didn't work. And I had been devastated all up until that point, but that felt like a loss to me.
Yeah.
And to pull myself out of that was so hard.
IVF can be a traumatizing journey for those who try and fail to successfully implant an embryo. But it can get even worse.
The doctor came in to the recovery room and she said, bad news, we found something called a hydrosalpinx, which is basically where your fallopian tube plugs up and fills with fluid. The bummer with that is that once it's detected, it has to be removed, your whole fallopian tube.
Wow.
So I had to go in for surgery. Came out of that surgery. Again, hey, bad news, you have severe endometriosis. Every step of the way, something bad would happen. My fertility doctor told me multiple times, hey, you really have bad luck. Like, if a doctor's telling you that, like, it kind of gets to you, like, geez, why am I having all this bad luck? It was really depressing, honestly. We're the type of people that waiting around isn't really going to help us in this situation. We're kind of like, if you want something, go for it. So we just kept going forward. Then we got to our first embryo transfer, and they grow it for a few days, usually about 5 days. And then you take another round of injectable medications to prime your uterus. And they basically take a small catheter and feed it in to your uterus. You're awake for it. It's uncomfortable. And you can see your embryo. They actually pull it up on a screen. You see this little ball that's your possible baby. And they're like, do you want to take a picture? And it's like, do we? Don't we? If it doesn't work. It's like a weird situation. Then you just lay there for a little while, lots of laying around. And then you go on your way. So then you're waiting basically for a phone call. And I remember we were at a coffee shop one morning and my phone rang and the nurse is like, hi, it's so-and-so. And you're just waiting. The seconds feel like hours. And she's like, you're pregnant. And I was like, oh my gosh, finally some good news. It was, one of the happiest moments of my life. My heart was beating. It was just such a happy relief to know that we finally were pregnant.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we were going about our normal lives and I had a little cramping and nothing major. Had a little spotting, but all the nurses, little spotting's normal. Don't worry about it. I had hormonal testing to make sure your HCG is rising appropriately, and it was doubling the way it was supposed to. So we went in for our first ultrasound to see our baby, and the nurse was scanning me. She was very quiet. She had a concerned look on her face, and she said, excuse me, I need to go get the doctor. Being a medical provider myself, I knew it was real bad. My husband was like, what's happening? I'm like, it's not good. Something's really bad. So the doctor came in and they showed me on the screen the baby was growing in my only remaining fallopian tube. A bomb went off over our heads, like literally shell shock. You can't see, you can't hear. The doctor's like, you need to have emergency surgery to remove your other tube. So I've counseled women on ectopic pregnancies. I've diagnosed them. It's a medical emergency. That patient has to go to the operating room to save their life.
Yeah.
Back in the day, women would die. Once that pregnancy is growing and ruptures inside, it causes internal bleeding. So I went to the ER, got checked in. We sat there for hours, and all of a sudden a nurse came in to wheel me to the OR. And I was like, no one talked to me. Like, I'm a physician assistant. I understand exactly what was happening, but on a personal level, they were ultimately taking me to the OR to sterilize me. And I'm like, I need to talk to a doctor. I just need to talk to someone. So they sent in another resident, and she was basically like, you're doing IVF anyway. This isn't changing anything. But it takes away your hope that, like, maybe someday I could naturally conceive.
Yeah.
Whew, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm trying to hold it together. Becoming like an officially sterile woman was obviously something I'm still coping with. My aunt, who had endometriosis, she never could have children, and she never got over it. She still talks about it. She's lonely. It's a huge part of her life, and I really saw myself going in her footsteps. We'd ask the doctor, like, when do we give up? I was really coming to the conclusion, I'm really probably never going to have children. I'm probably never going to be a mom.
I had this conversation with my mom a few months ago. When you make an innocent comment like, so when you having a baby or you want to be grandparents or whatever, I'm like, that can be a really triggering thing. And I kind of had a meltdown. I'm like, well, I'm trying and then I'm doing, all these things, but I have all of these things. I have this wrong with me, and that's, making it. And then I just word vomited.
We actually didn't even tell our parents anything. We felt like it was a path we needed to walk alone for some reason. I just didn't want to burden them with worrying about our fertility struggles. And ultimately, they couldn't help us.
When you're going through fertility issues, you have a lot of things said to you. Like, well, have you considered adoption? Or why is it so important for you to have a biological child? Some people are so quick to pass judgment and just assume that us infertile people should adopt all the children, and also assuming that that's an easy process when it is not.
Sometimes I'd walk away from a conversation just feeling worse.
Even though I've gone through infertility and I've gone through a miscarriage, I still don't know what to say to people. I don't know how to help people. And I think part of that is there's really nothing you can say.
This powerlessness to help those going through infertility isn't just an issue that affects well-meaning friends or parents.
Your husband is helpless, essentially, because you're the one doing the shots. You're the one going to the doctor's appointments, getting the blood taken, and trying to, stay on top of it all.
The biggest part for me is making sure I don't forget that, as tough as all the things we're going through, she's going through even more.
And see, I worry sometimes when he says stuff like that because, my husband is a whole person that's having feelings and going through a journey as well. And I hope that he doesn't feel neglected throughout this whole process because everyone's looking at me and worrying about how I am.
I felt like this guttural, instinctual pain, whereas he was concerned for me. His pain was about my emotional well-being.
You feel bad because there's literally very little to nothing I can do.
But it is really important to have him there, mixing up the shots. And then once you get pregnant, then they introduce the mother of all shots, this progesterone and oil needle that goes in your back. That's all him. I just iced my back up and turn on the TV, and then he would stab me with it every single night for 14 weeks. If I had to do that on my own, I don't even know. So his role is extremely important. I'll let my husband talk for himself. I just always kind of get the sense that he's maybe done with it earlier than I am.
Every time we've done a cycle, you can see the emotional, physical, and just overall drain it is. And what I fear is this never-ending cycle if we continue to do rounds that don't work out. Just having that fear of this becoming a marital issue because it adds a strain on the marriage, essentially.
That feeling of being so alone while facing fertility struggles is as much a result of the biology as it is the social stigma. And the latter is something we can actually change.
I think our generation is the first generation that's really starting to openly talk about it.
When I do eventually get pregnant, because I do believe I will, and I make my inevitable social media post about it, I want to be very honest and be like, this was not easy. We struggled. It was hard. If you are struggling and you feel upset by looking at this picture, I get it and I'm sorry.
Another thing that I've noticed is people have started commenting on rainbow babies. Facebook friends will be like, oh, here's my rainbow baby.
Yeah, what's a rainbow baby?
So a rainbow baby is a baby that's born after you've had a miscarriage.
Ah.
Which is wonderful, great, beautiful, magical. But I feel like it's also just hinting, like, I had a miscarriage, but now I have this baby.
Like the only way we're allowed to talk about it is if there's a happy ending.
It's hard to blame people for wanting to celebrate when they do finally cross that finish line after so much failure.
I really thought, I was like, I am never going to see a positive pregnancy test ever. I kept peeing on sticks, like basically all day. It consumes you when you're in some, it's called like the 2-week wait. It consumes you, you know, you're just testing. And I'm like holding it up to the light and everything. And I see like the faintest of lines. I was like, oh my gosh.
Immediately, I just dropped everything and I went right to the pharmacy. I bought 10 pregnancy tests and I took them all home. And I drank a lot of water and took a lot of pregnancy tests just so I could have that experience of peeing on something and having it say something good. And that was that. And it's like, you're pregnant? Okay. Now what? Everything will get better once I'm pregnant. That's what I thought. Everything will get better. I won't have this sadness or this anxiety and that was not the case for me.
Total fear. Not happy feeling, really, more just scared. My pregnancy numbers didn't quite rise normally this time. So I was like, oh my God, something's wrong. Something bad's going to happen again. Only bad things happen to me. Pregnancy loss really takes the joy out of subsequent pregnancies. And it's really sad.
But again, I told myself those 40 weeks of pregnancy, it's normal. It's normal that I'm scared because it was so hard for me to get pregnant. When the baby comes, I'll be better. It'll be better. And nope. Because the baby comes and then the baby's there and you're like, nothing can happen to you. And I'm sure every mom must feel like that. But I think I had an extra layer of fear because this was my one baby. I don't have backup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any eggs frozen or embryos frozen. This is it. This is my child.
Having a successful pregnancy is hardly the end of the road for these couples. They then face the question of whether to continue a journey that has already proven to be traumatic and life-consuming.
That first year of being a mom, I thought too, well, fertility issues won't bother me anymore. I have a baby. I have the thing that I worked so hard to get. And every time people would announce their pregnancy, it would be like someone was kicking me in the stomach. And I wish I could tell you that feeling's gone away, and it hasn't. And now my daughter's 4, so she asks, I want a baby brother. That was her kick for a long time. I want a baby brother. And I'm just like, man, that hurts still.
I did always want a bigger family. I do want another one. And I mean, I'm looking at this knowing that there's a good chance we will not be able to have a second child. And you're just like, maybe she really does need a sibling. Maybe we have to try. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much pressure.
I'm often asked, when do you think you'll have another one? And I often lead with, I really wish we could, but we had fertility issues, and say something like that to make them aware. Everyone just can't want a child and then produce a child. That's not everyone's picture. And talking about it even with my daughter, I'll tell her, I wish I could have another baby. and you could have a sister or brother, but you were a lucky one. You were our one shot. I think my experience with motherhood has been one that's been couched in appreciativeness. Don't get me wrong, it's hard, and sometimes I'm so tired, but there was this layer of just being like appreciative. I don't know, it's so hard to explain. I think grief is just kind of something that it's always there, but it just gets a little bit easier to live with, and you sort of live around it. And that's how I think about the fertility stuff, is like grieving the loss of the child that wasn't, and the years of trying, and the years of sadness.
If this journey teaches patience, it can also imprint a traumatic sense of uncertainty. It reshapes your relationship with hope itself, especially when you're still lost in the woods.
I try really hard to take it one day at a time, because in the beginning of this round, I thought, well, I could get pregnant this month and have a baby by July. And then it was, I can have a baby by August, and then October, and then December. And so I just decided to I have to stop that. I don't know for sure when it's exactly going to happen. I can't get up tomorrow and say, I'm going to do that shot exactly right, and I'm going to end up pregnant. There's a lack of control. And so there's a little bit of feeling lost and at the mercy of science and whatever the universe has in store for us.
It feels very cyclical. There are some months where I feel great and I'm like, everything's going to work out. And then there's some months, and honestly, this is one of them, where I just feel really defeated. I mean, how do you continuously motivate to keep trying something that you constantly fail at? But the only option for me is to keep trying. I want to have a child. So to me, there's not another option. Like, it's not like I'm just going to give up and be like, well, it didn't work, so I guess we're just not having children.
Once you make the momentous decision to have children, you cross this invisible threshold. You become a person willing to radically alter your life by taking on a vast responsibility for the next few decades. When you're already that person, it's near impossible to just quit. We certainly aren't.
What do you think?
I think it's going to say yes.
Yeah, you do? Why?
I don't know, just got a feeling. Plus, 2020 just owes this to us. 3 black bars.
Oh, God. Plus, I think it'd be so exciting to give birth between our birthdays.
Come on, test.
Come on, 4 bars.
Okay, this is the final phase. Barring any acts of cat.
Come on, stick. Give us the goods.
They really make you wait for it.
God. What? I don't believe that.
Not pregnant.
Did I not pee on it long enough? I have trouble believing that.
Which perhaps makes sense, given the fact that we all got here because someone succeeded at this. How could it be so hard?
And what would you do if it just never happened, no matter how hard you tried?
A lot of these women, I don't think they realize they're doing it, but someone needs to also say, if you are done, it's okay. You're still amazing. You still worked hard. You gold star. And I think a lot of women feel guilty about that because there's so many women that say, don't give up, keep going. I did XYZ, 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 and look, it finally worked out for me. And so it kind of gives this false sense of if I just keep going, it's going to work out. You can lose sight of life outside of it and try to remember to live and try to remember what you do have and not what you may not get. But I think it's okay to kind of get to your point where you're like, you know what, I can't do anymore. I've done as much as I can and I can't do anymore, and that's okay.
Next time, how to accept the unacceptable.
Join us for part 4 of our infertility miniseries. the end of the road.
So come on, get lost with us. Find us on Twitter, @AmandaKnox.
@ManUnderBridge.
And please, if you find these difficult conversations to be as important as we do, help us out. Give us a 5-star review and consider joining our community on Patreon. We're completely independent, and we can only do this work thanks to our generous patrons.
This episode was written, edited, and sound designed by us, with theme music by Josh Budo Karp.
Fun fact, for every hour of Labyrinths you enjoy, we put in dozens of hours researching, outreaching, interviewing, scripting, editing, and audio engineering.
What keeps us going?
Coffee. So if you're enjoying Labyrinths, please buy us a coffee.
Head over to patreon.com/KnoxRobinson, where you can make a monthly donation.
Thanks for getting lost with us.